twilight settled over the thorn groves like a slow breath, the sky bleeding from gold to bruised purple as Sir Cael Thorn approached the Bramble Heart. The tree towered above him, a monstrous silhouette of gnarled branches twisted with unnatural angles, each limb adorned with thorns sharp enough to pierce armor and flesh alike. The air grew thick with the scent of iron and resin, a bitter tang that clawed at his throat. Around him, the whispers of the forest hushed, as if the very land held its breath. Caelan's pulse hammered in his ears, a drumbeat of fear and determination. He knelt before the ancient tree, the soil rich and dark beneath his knees, littered with fallen thorns that glimmered faintly with an otherworldly sheen. His hands trembled as he traced the bark rough, yet pulsing faintly alive. The Bramble Heart was no mere tree. It was a living testament to the kingdom's oath, a vessel of power and sacrifice intertwined. From the shadows emerged the old Thornkeeper, his gaunt form barely more than a whisper among the twisted trunks. "The Bramble Heart does not give its gift lightly," the elder intoned, voice like dry leaves rustling. "It takes as much as it grants. You must be ready to bleed in body and soul." Cael nodded, swallowing the lump of dread lodged in his throat. "I am ready, for honor, for the kingdom." The old Thornkeeper stepped back into the shadows, leaving Cael alone with the tree. Drawing a ceremonial dagger from his belt, its blade etched with ancient runes, Cael made the first cut across his palm, the sting sharp and immediate. He pressed his wounded hand against the bark, feeling the thorns respond, shifting and curling toward him like living fingers. A cold fire erupted where flesh met wood, a searing agony that stole his breath. He gritted his teeth, refusing to cry out, even as the pain deepened, clawing into his mind. Visions surged unbidden, nights from long ago, their faces twisted in silent screams, dark thorns bursting through their chests as their souls were claimed. The kingdom itself appeared fragmented, veiled in shadows of corruption, nobles scheming behind gilded curtains, their whispers like poison drifting on the wind. Caelan's knees buckled, the world tilting as the Bramble Heart's curse clawed at him. Yet within the darkness, a faint glimmer, a single thorn blooming with soft light anchored his spirit. With a guttural cry, he forced himself upright, exhaling raggedly. Hours passed, or perhaps only moments, in the timeless embrace of pain and spirit. The thorns wove through his veins, binding his soul to the ancient power that both promised strength and whispered death. His breath steadied, the agony ebbing to a dull roar. When the first stars blinked awake in the twilight sky, Cael rose fully, his arm now entwined with the living sinew of the Bramble Heart's thorns. They pulsed gently, a heartbeat shared between man and tree. Though scars marred his flesh and shadows clung beneath his eyes, a new resolve burned within him, a solemn vow reborn through sacrifice. He cast a glance back toward the kingdom's distant lights, faint embers flickering through the night. The path ahead was shrouded in peril, the curse a constant shadow at his side. Yet Cael Thorn was no longer the broken exile he had been. Bound by blood and thorn, he was a force awakened, ready to face the darkness within and without. "So begins the true test," he whispered to the wind, voice steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. "May my oath bloom, even in the shadow of death." The Bramble Heart's thorns shimmered softly, as if answering, and the night closed around them both. The great hall of the kingdom's castle was alive with murmurs, the air thick as nobles in rich velvets and silks gathered beneath towering stone arches. Flickering torchlight cast long shadows across the marble floor, dancing like restless spirits as the courtiers shifted uneasily in their seats. At the heart of this gathering, Lord Marek Vane stood with a presence that commanded attention. His armor, blackened and etched with thorn motifs that seemed to writhe subtly in the light, reflected an aura of cold authority. His sharp features were set into a mask of composed menace, his piercing eyes scanning the assembly with calculated precision. "The tradition of thorn binding," Marek began, his voice steady and low, "is not merely a rite of passage, it is the very foundation of our kingdom's strength. Those who wield the power of the thorns must be guided by a firm hand, lest chaos consume us all. His words dripped with a quiet menace, yet beneath the surface lay a promise. Those who aligned with him would flourish, while dissenters would find themselves crushed beneath the weight of his will. Around the hall, nobles exchanged wary glances, some nodding in reluctant agreement, others hiding concern behind practiced smiles. Among them sat Lady Myron, her dark hair braided intricately with silver threads that caught the torchlight like woven stars. She was a distant cousin to Sir Cael Thorn, and though her position demanded loyalty to the crown, her heart beat with quiet rebellion. Her sharp emerald eyes flickered with unease as she listened to Marik's words, the weight of his ambition pressing down like a storm cloud. Later, in the hushed secrecy of a shadowed chamber, Lady Myron moved with careful grace. The room was sparse, lit only by a single candle whose flame quivered as if sharing her apprehension. From beneath her cloak, she withdrew a folded parchment, its edges worn and stained. With a glance over her shoulder, she slipped it into the hands of a trusted servant waiting silently in the dark. "This must reach Sir Cael," she whispered, her voice barely more than a breath. The court listens to Marik's every word, but his true designs are darker than any dare speak aloud. Her resolve was fierce, tempered by the knowledge that discovery meant ruin not only for herself, but for the fragile hope that Cael might yet reclaim his honor and challenge the corrupt noble's grip on the kingdom. Back in the great hall, Marik's loyal knights gathered in quiet corners and shadowed alcoves. Their whispered exchanges were sharp and urgent, plotting the next moves in a game where power was won not by the sword alone, but by secrets and subtlety. These men, clad in armor that mirrored their lord's dark elegance, embodied the poisonous corruption Marik represented, unyielding, relentless, and deadly. Outside the castle walls, beneath the ancient thorn groves, Lady Myron found brief solace. She stood before a high window in her chamber, gazing out at the delicate blossoms glowing silver in the moonlight. The blooming thorns cast shifting shadows across her face, a poignant reflection of the fragile hope she clung to amidst the encroaching darkness. The kingdom's fate hung in the balance, caught between the choking grasp of Marik's ambition and the quiet defiance that stirred in unexpected places. As the court's shadows deepened, so too did the resolve of those who dared to oppose the rising tide of corruption. Within this web of intrigue and power, Lady Myron's secret support for Cael was a spark of fragile light destined to ignite a resistance that might yet bring change. But the path was perilous, and every whispered secret risked unraveling in a court where trust was scarce and betrayal ever near. As the chapter closed, the echoes of Marik's cold promises lingered, setting the stage for a confrontation that would test the very soul of the kingdom. The thorn-bound tradition, once a symbol of honor and sacrifice, now stood at a crossroads, its future shaped by the shadows of ambition and the quiet bloom of rebellion. The question remained, could Cael, armed with Lady Myron's covert aid, navigate the treacherous currents of the court and reclaim not only his honor, but the kingdom's soul? The answer would come in the battles yet to be fought, both seen and unseen. And in the stillness of the thorn groves, the bramble heart waited, its dark branches poised to embrace another willing heart. The court's shadows deepened, and with them the stakes of the game grew ever higher. The fading light of the sun draped the thorn groves in a melancholic amber, as Sir Cael Thorn sat motionless against the gnarled bark of a thorn bush. The sharp scent of blooming thorns mingled with the earthiness of crushed leaves beneath him, offering no comfort to the weariness etched deep into his lean frame. His eyes, shadowed by the weight of countless sleepless nights, stared blankly at the darkening sky. Scar running down his left cheek twitched subtly as a faint breeze stirred the tangled strands of his dark hair. Footsteps approached, deliberate and steady, breaking the fragile silence that draped the grove like a shroud. Caelan's gaze flickered upward, to meet the broad-shouldered figure advancing through the underbrush, Sir Joran. The younger knight's usual perpetual grin was absent, replaced by a grim mask of concern and resolve. The cropped dark hair caught the last rays of light, a stark contrast to the solemnity in his eyes. Caelan, Joran's voice was low but firm, laced with a mixture of frustration and care. "You've been hiding away long enough. The kingdom is bleeding, and you're sitting here like a ghost among the thorns." Caelan's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "I'm no ghost, Joran, just a man who knows his place now cast aside, forgotten." Joran crouched beside him, the rough fabric of his armor whispering against the dry brush. "You were not forgotten. Not by me, and not by those who still believe in what you once were. But you've let this guilt chain you tighter than any thorn could." The words struck deeper than Joran intended. Caelan's breath hitched, the memories surging, unbidden visions of fire and blood, of comrades lost to betrayal and folly. The failed mission that had shattered their brotherhood played like a relentless storm behind his eyes. "You think I don't know?" Caelan's voice cracked with the weight of years. "I carry their faces with me every day. I failed them. I failed you." Joran's hand landed firmly on Caelan's shoulder, a grounding presence amidst the turmoil. "No one's perfect. Not even knights. But running from it won't change the past. You have to face it, face yourself, if you want to reclaim what's left of your honor." Silence settled between them, thick and suffocating, until the distant call of a night bird pierced the stillness. Caelan's gaze drifted to the thorn bushes that surrounded them, their dark branches twisted and blooming with fierce beauty. Each thorn seemed to gleam with a quiet defiance, a reminder of the oaths they had sworn and the sacrifices yet to come. "I don't know if I can," Caelan admitted, voice barely a whisper. "Trust is a fragile thing. I've broken it too many times." Joran's grin returned, tentative but genuine this time. "Then let's start small, together, if you let me." The first hesitant nod from Caelan was a fragile bloom in the twilight, a silent promise that maybe, just maybe, the fractured brotherhood could begin to heal. As night cloaked the thorn groves, the two knights sat side by side beneath the blooming thorns, shadows lengthening but hearts lightened by the fragile thread of renewed trust. The road ahead remained perilous, but for the first time in a long while, Caelan felt the stirrings of hope, a thorn-bound oath not yet broken. Yet, as the darkness deepened, an unspoken question lingered in the air. Could the bonds of brotherhood truly overcome the scars of betrayal? Or was this but a fleeting moment before the thorns would claim them once more? The dim glow of candlelight flickered over weathered parchment, its surface cracked and yellowed with age. Alicia's slender fingers traced the delicate lines of ancient runes, her emerald eyes narrowing as she whispered the forgotten language. The herbalist's cottage smelled of crushed herbs and damp earth, a grounding presence amid the growing storm of revelation. Caelan sat rigidly on a worn wooden stool, his scarred cheek tense, every muscle taut as he absorbed the weight of her words. "This," Alicia murmured, "is the origin of the Brambleheart's curse, a pact forged centuries ago between our kingdom's first rulers and the sentient thorn trees. Power, yes, but paid for in blood and spirit." Caelan's gaze dropped to the parchment, where the faded ink depicted scenes of knights entwined with thorn branches, their faces serene yet marked by sacrifice. They bound themselves to the trees willingly. His voice was rough, disbelief mingling with a surge of hope. "They sought strength to protect the realm," Alicia said, "but the price was steep. Each bond demanded a life, the host's own soul entwined with the thorn's essence, destined to perish so the tree might bloom. It was a sacred oath, but one forgotten by many, buried beneath centuries of tradition and power struggles." A silence fell between them, thick and suffocating. Caelan's heart pounded, the revelation tearing at the fragile hope he clung to. The Brambleheart was no mere legend. It was a living testament to sacrifice, its curse a cruel reminder of honor's cost. "Why tell me this now?" Caelan's voice was barely a whisper, the weight of his impending fate pressing down. Alicia's eyes softened. Because you must know. To bond with the Brambler Heart is to accept that sacrifice willingly. To face death not as defeat, but as a final act of devotion. The curse is not just a danger. It is a call to transcendence, one that few can endure. Memories of his failed mission flickered through Caelan's mind, the faces of comrades lost, the bitter sting of betrayal. Was he ready to face this new trial? To embrace the thorn's deadly embrace and emerge transformed, or to be consumed entirely? The candlelight dimmed as the last flame guttered, casting long shadows that seemed to reach for the corners of the room. Caelan sat alone, the oppressive darkness pressing in like the thorns waiting to claim him. Yet in that solitude, a fierce determination kindled. He would not let his past define him. He would bind himself to the Brambler Heart, bear its curse, and reclaim the honor stolen from him. Outside, the wind whispered through the thorn groves, branches scratching against window panes in a haunting rhythm. The sharp silhouettes danced eerily, casting jagged patterns that mirrored the turmoil within Caelan's soul. He rose, stepping to the window to gaze upon the looming silhouette of the Brambler Heart against the night sky, its dark branches twisted yet blooming with dangerous beauty. The path ahead was perilous, the cost unimaginable, but the oath he bore was unbreakable. With a steady breath, Caelan embraced the painful truth. The curse was no longer a shadow to fear, but a burden to carry, a thorn-bound destiny he would meet head-on. He turned from the window, resolve hardening like steel. Tomorrow, the ritual would begin. Tomorrow, the Brambler Heart's embrace would either consume him or forge him anew. And whatever the outcome, Caelan would hold fast to the hope that through sacrifice, the kingdom might yet bloom again. The night deepened, and with it, the promise of a new dawn, a dawn shaped by thorns and honor, by pain and redemption. The forest around Caelan seemed to close in tighter with every step he took, the thorned branches weaving a suffocating canopy overhead. The shadows cast by the twisted limbs painted eerie patterns on the mossy ground, reflecting the turmoil in his mind. His breath came in shallow gasps, each inhalation sharp with the scent of damp earth and crushed foliage. He could hear the distant clatter of armor, the unmistakable rhythm of approaching footsteps that raised his pulse into a frantic drumbeat. "They're closing in," Sir Joran's gruff voice broke the tense silence, his sword already drawn and gleaming dully in the muted light. "Marik's dogs don't waste time." Caelan nodded, tightening his grip on the hilt of his blade. The scar along his left cheek prickled as a cold wind whispered through the underbrush, carrying with it a warning. The thorn trees around them seemed almost alive, their blooming branches swaying despite the stillness of the air. Caelan felt the familiar sting beneath his skin, the subtle pulse of the Brambler Heart's thorns threading through his veins. It was a cruel gift, pain laced with strength, sacrifice entwined with survival. The bond burned like wildfire, a raw and relentless force that demanded surrender yet promised power. From the shadows, the first knight lunged, a towering figure clad in blackened armor adorned with cruel, twisted thorns. Steel met steel with a resounding clang as Caelan deflected the blow, sparks flying from the impact. The air was thick with tension, every breath heavy with the scent of iron and sweat. Around him, the forest echoed with the cries of combat, a symphony of desperation and resolve. Sir Joran was a whirlwind beside him, his broad shoulders moving with practiced ease as he parried and countered, his perpetual grin replaced by a grimace of concentration. Together, they fought back to back, a small bastion of defiance against the encroaching tide of Marik's forces. But the knights were many, their numbers a relentless wave. Caelan felt the searing pain intensify, the Brambler Heart's thorns beneath his skin flaring like burning embers. Visions flashed before his eyes, fallen comrades, shattered oaths, the kingdom's dark corruption whispered in the rustling leaves. Each stab of agony steeled his spirit, binding him closer to the cursed tree. A knight's blade sliced through the air, grazing Caelan's arm. Blood welled instantly, mixing with the sap that oozed from the thorned vines entwined in his flesh. The taste of iron filled his mouth, but he did not falter. Instead, he drew deeper from the Brambleheart's power, his senses sharpening, reflexes heightening. The battle wove through the dense forest, a deadly dance of steel and survival. Branches clawed at his cloak and face, tearing at his skin with cruel precision. The thorns bloomed anew with each heartbeat, their sharp petals a constant reminder of the price he paid. Yet, within the pain blossomed a strange clarity. His oath was not just a chain but a lifeline. Suddenly, a piercing whistle cut through the din. Caelan's eyes darted to the east, where a narrow ravine yawned between ancient trunks.
"This way!"
He shouted to Sir Joran, who nodded without hesitation. Together, they broke through the encirclement, sprinting with desperate speed. The thorned branches scraped and tore at their cloaks and skin, but Caelan welcomed the sting. It was proof he was alive, still fighting. Behind them, the shouts of pursuit grew fainter, swallowed by the thick tangle of the groves. Panting and bloodied, Caelan collapsed against a gnarled tree, the Brambleheart's pulse still thrumming fiercely in his veins. Around him, the thorn branches shimmered faintly in the twilight, a blooming crown of sacrifice and hope. "We can't keep running," Sir Joran said between breaths, his eyes dark with worry. "Maric won't relent." Caelan nodded slowly, the weight of his oath settling heavier on his shoulders than ever. "Then we fight smarter. We fight with what the Brambleheart has given me." The forest seemed to hold its breath as the cursed power simmered beneath his skin, the blooming thorns a beacon of both promise and peril. The path ahead was fraught with danger, but Caelan's resolve had never been fiercer. The thorn in his side was not just an enemy's blade, it was the kingdom's corruption, the cost of honor, and the seed of his redemption. As darkness crept around the edges of the grove, Caelan's eyes burned with a solemn fire. The battle was far from over, and every step forward was a testament to the oath he had sworn a vow to endure, to sacrifice, and to bloom anew. No matter the thorns that awaited him, the cabin was quiet except for the low crackling of the fire, its warm glow mingling with the scent of crushed herbs and damp earth. Elysia moved with gentle precision, her fingers careful as they cleansed the gashes that the Brambleheart's thorns had etched into Caelan's flesh. The pain was sharp, but the deeper agony was within, a gnawing ache that no salve could reach. Caelan sat rigid, his breathing shallow, eyes shadowed by exhaustion and the weight of his oath. "You must let the pain in," Elysia told him softly. "Only then can it begin to heal." Her emerald eyes met his, unwavering and full of quiet strength. He nodded, allowing himself a moment of vulnerability, a rarity for the brooding night. Night fell heavy around the cabin, and Caelan's rest was restless at best. The Brambleheart's curse had seeped into his dreams, twisting them into a tormenting tapestry of memory and menace. He saw the faces of fallen comrades, their eyes accusing and sorrowful, as thorny vines coiled and strangled around his spirit. The cries of the past echoed whispers of betrayal, loss, and the heavy burden of survival. Sweat soaked his brow, and he woke gasping, the shadows of the cabin seeming to loom closer. Elysia was there beside him, her presence a balm to his frayed nerves. "You are not alone," she whispered, pressing a cool hand to his fevered forehead. Over the next days, Elysia shared her knowledge of the thorn-binding rituals and the nature of the Brambleheart's curse. Her voice was steady, weaving stories of ancient knights who had suffered similar fates, some lost, others transformed. "The curse feeds on fear and doubt," she explained, "but it also tests the strength of the bond. You must find balance within yourself, or the thorns will consume you." Caelan listened, the threads of hope slowly knitting through the despair. He realized that his path was not only one of pain, but of potential rebirth. Their conversations deepened, crossing the boundaries of healer and patient into something more fragile and profound. Elysia's compassion chipped away at the walls Caelan had built around his heart. One morning, as light filtered softly through the thorny branches outside, they sat together beneath a tree's protective boughs. The soft, rustling leaves seemed to murmur promises of endurance and renewal. In this quiet moment, Caelan allowed himself to breathe, to hope, and to trust not only in Elysia but in the possibility that his shattered honor could be made whole again. Yet the curse remained a relentless shadow. Each night brought new visions, darker and more vivid, forcing Caelan to confront the ghosts he had long buried. He saw the faces of those lost to his failure, the betrayal that had stained his soul, and the relentless march of thorns that threatened to choke his very essence. The struggle was as much within as without, a battle of spirit that no sword could win. But with Elysia's guidance and his own stubborn resolve, Caelan began to understand that healing was not linear, nor was redemption a gift. It was a hard-won bloom growing through the pain. As the chapter drew to a close, Caelan stood at the edge of the thorn grove, the morning light glinting on the dew-soaked leaves. His wounds were healing, his spirit battered but unbroken. The oath he had sworn echoed in his mind like the steady drumbeat of a distant war horn. Ahead lay the long road of sacrifice and struggle, but for the first time in many moons, he felt the fragile stirrings of hope. The Brambleheart's curse was a thorn in his side, but it was also the seed of his redemption. And in that truth, Caelan found the strength to face whatever darkness awaited him next. The night was silent save for the distant howl of a lone wolf, a reminder that the path forward would be perilous. But Caelan's grip tightened on the hilt of his sword, and his gaze hardened. He would not falter. Not now, not ever. For in the heart of the thorn-bound kingdom, the battle for honor was just beginning, and the thorns were blooming anew.